to this episode of Kevin's Garage. My journey as a complete novice to stumble through the building of my Factory 5 Roadster. So what have we been up to this week? Well, it's been a quite busy week. So this week we're going to talk about the installation of the firewall, the installation of the front plate to the driver's side footbox, and probably most importantly, the installation of the pedal box and the master cylinders. All right, so without further ado, let's get to it. Okay, so before we start working on the pedal box, just have to add a couple of additional panels. So just been working on the firewall. Just had to make a couple of trims on this before I installed it. This was a little bit proud here, as was that corner, and this didn't quite fit flat here as well. As you can see, I've already pre-drilled the holes and started the process. I did the same as last time, drilled the panel first, then marked out, and we're using a couple of clecos, drilled through the frame, making sure that the holes were nice and neat. Then I used the deburring tool just to make sure that I took off the burrs. And in fact, my friend Jim, who I did the build school with, he just recently showed me that if you just use a large drill, this is just a 1/2 inch, to just deburr as well, that's also just as good. So thank you, Jim. So now I'm just going to put in a few of the rivets, and then we can move on to the next stage of the process. Okay, so now we're going to be inserting the next panel before we can start work on the footbox assembly. I have to say this was a little more tricky than I maybe imagined. So first point is obviously make sure that you line up all of the holes, drill all of the holes, tidy them up, because obviously this is going through multiple panels. Mine was a little bit of a challenge because this actually wasn't fitted correctly when it was delivered to me, so I had to lift it up a little bit further. So check that to make sure that obviously this hole really aligns with where it's supposed to be in the core chassis of the car. Again, I cleaned them all up. I've already applied some silicone. One thing is that you do have to drill through this main plate. I decided to put about maybe 6 or 7 rivet holes in here. It's a little harder, so it's a little more challenging. Don't do what I did. I think with this hole here, I drilled straight into the weld. Not the best thing to do, so broke, I think, my 2nd or 3rd drill bit so far. So let's just pop this in. Should be relatively straightforward. Now we've done all of the prep work. Right, there you go. I think the easiest thing for me to do is, as usual, pop a quick cleco or 2 in. Makes the whole process go that much more smoothly. And then I can just obviously start to rivet this straight in. So that one's not quite aligned. Oh, there it is. Perfect. All right. So there we are. Let's just pop the first rivet in, and then we can complete the process. Yes, that did a better job. So the longer one did a better job, so that's a good learning. The one thing you have to do here is at the bottom, do not rivet this piece, because if you remember from when you took the aluminium or the aluminum panels off, there's actually another panel that goes under there. So just leave that, don't put any silicone into that whole section. And the book, it describes it on the right, but of course it's as you look at it, it's on the left. All right, let's move on and just pop it in. Okay, so the next thing to do is actually assemble the pedal box itself. So I've already attached the pedal pads with the screws provided. And now I'm just marking up the brake switch mount and the clutch safety switch mount. And here you are, you can see they've been attached with the appropriate hardware screw and lock nut. Next thing to do is to attach the switches with the appropriate bolt and 2 lock nuts, so they're in the right position, so that they will obviously engage when the pads are depressed. Okay, so there it is. I think it's time to move on. Okay, so next up, it's just a matter of now taking the pedal assembly and then just attaching that to the underside of the mounting bracket using the button head screws and lock nuts, before then taking that over and installing it into the car. Okay, so we are fitting the pedal box. So I'm going to go sort of mobile cam for a few learnings through this process for me. Firstly, we'll sort of zoom in a little, as I'm going to point it out. So you can see these are actually the 4 hex button head bolts that you use to actually fit the pedal box. I'll show you that in a moment. So the first lesson for me is when you actually are riveting this panel here to the back plate, is don't put a rivet like I did right here, because it gets right in the way of the pedal box. So I'm going to finagle that in a moment. So just make sure that you're sort of on the perimeters of the area. Then the next thing is that I'll just go underneath if I can. When you're fitting the bolts, just make sure that you don't tighten too much, because when you are fitting this back plate here to hold in the pedal box, you can see you have to get it lined up, and the only way that it will fit is if everything is loose and you can jiggle it about a bit. So the next part of the process is just to mark with a silver Sharpie. I can sort of come round here. This one is a little bit more awkward. I think I can get it just through there. You're actually going to drill 1/4 inch holes. I need to take the whole contraption off, but it's going pretty well. Oh, the other thing as well to remember is come down under here, is when you're fitting the brake pedal. Actually, I'm going to zoom out a little, which is here. Just make sure that it is behind this strut, so they should be just sort of running freely forwards. All right, so that's it. So I'll come back in a few minutes. So as you can see, the pedal box is now complete, and I have to say the Factory 5 team do a great job in both the manual and on their instruction videos on how to pull everything together. But there are just a couple of things that I would like to point out, which probably will make your job, if you're a novice like me, just a little bit easier. So to do that, I think we need to go to Kevin Cam. Okay, so Kevin Cam has been activated. So let's now dive in and have a look at the pedal box assembly, and let's talk about 1 or 2 learnings for me. Now, one of the first things that Factory 5 mentions in the manual is when you look at the master cylinders, is you see that this bolt here, well, they recommend for each of the master cylinders, and here we have 3, we have the hydraulic clutch, and then we have the 2 brakes, is to take about 5/8 of an inch and cut it off the master cylinder screw there. Now, when we were on the build school with Factory 5, they actually recommended that you don't take too much off initially, maybe up to 5/16. That's what I did. And that really gives you enough room to play to be able to fasten and tighten the bolt enough to enable the mechanism to actually work appropriately. So that's what I did. So that was the first learning. The next learning, and it's not particularly clear until you sort of get into the workings, is if I can go sort of above here, and maybe it's a little awkward, but you're really looking to be balancing. These are the two brakes, and you can obviously label them and have one for the front brakes and one for the rear brakes. I've not labeled mine yet. But really the plan is to have the distance between here and here equal and the distance here and here equal, and then they should all be sort of parallel in a line across the top. And that just means that you have at a starting point for your brakes an equal amount of tension or force exerted on your front brakes or your rear brakes at the same time. Now, of course, you can balance that at a later stage, but it's always great to start off with everything in balance. So that's what you're aiming to do. Also, it's perfectly normal for there not to be a bolt on this side and there be a bolt on this side. It's not tight yet because you don't do that until the final process and you've got your brakes fully lined up and ready. Okay, so what else was there to point out? Yes, towards the end you put the sort of the bracing plate on and tighten up those 4 bolts there. Then of course you're just putting on the connectors, these 3 plastic connectors with the clips that you can see. Those will be the inputs from the obviously the brake fluid and the clutch fluid will go in there, and then these really are the outputs which actually will go to the brake line. So really you can face these anyway depending on where you will actually have your fluid reservoirs. I think mine are probably going to be here somewhere, and then the outputs really, the recommendation is they all face upwards. All right, so that's that. As you can come and have a look down here. Obviously you've got the brakes, the pedals. Another thing to point out is I've put mine on the left because really you know, you need a little bit more room, and I'm quite a large individual, so it's quite nice to have a bit more room for the accelerator pedal. And I'm just going to go around here to talk through a couple of learnings on the accelerator pedal. So excuse me while I climb inside the vehicle. A couple of learnings on the accelerator pedal, and the first one was really again from the build school. So here you can see this is the pedal as supplied by Factory 5. The only learning that we had on the build school, and even though the risk is very small, what you don't want is any opportunity for the accelerator pedal to catch under this bar here. So what the recommendation is that you just cut off the top little section of the accelerator pedal and then put another hole exactly the same size further down, and then obviously just finish that off so there's no danger of that ever getting caught. The rest of the installation is very straightforward, and I've just stuck with the Factory 5 pedal. I know there are other versions available from companies like Breeze, but I'm just sticking with what I have at this stage, and we'll see how it goes. All right, so those are the major learnings. And obviously you just torque everything down, and then later on we'll talk about where to place the reservoirs and how to connect it all up. All right. Okay, so that's it for this episode of Kevin's Garage. We've got the pedal box assembly to where we need it to be at this stage, and we can move on to what we're doing next week. In fact, next week what we're doing is we're moving on to the steering. So we'll see how we go there. Apologies if this episode was a little all over the place in terms of stills and different videos and Kevin's cam. It's probably fair to say that the hardest part of this whole build process is actually putting together these darn videos. But I have to say I'm really quite enjoying it, and hopefully you are too. And if you do, then send me a comment or a question, and please like and subscribe. All right, thank you. That's it for this week.